This plane ticket shows signs of fraud. The word fraud hung in the air, clinging to Ava Cole, the black woman standing calmly in line in the suspicious eyes of the passengers around her. Doubt spread like an invisible virus. "Please step aside, ma'am," Lauren Price, the airline employee, ordered coldly. "Is there something wrong with my ticket?" Ava asked. Even. Not loud, not defensive. "We need to verify. Please step aside." Lauren looked at Ava's first-class ticket as if it were contraband, not a valid ticket. She tapped away at the keyboard, occasionally glancing up at Ava with barely concealed disbelief. Minutes later, Captain Dana Blake appeared at the gate. Her uniform was immaculate, her eyes were cold, and then she suddenly slapped Ava hard across the face. The sound was loud, sharp. It stunned the area that had just gone silent. Do you want to know what led to that slap? The slap that ended careers, sparked controversy, and exposed a system of discrimination that hid behind a facade of professionalism? This is not just a story about a woman who was wrongly accused, humiliated, and attacked because of the color of her skin. This is a story about what happens when that woman stands up and shows the world who she really is. If you speak out against injustice and discrimination, comment "Justice for Ava" and hit follow to see more stories like this. The airport in the morning, the blue-white lights reflecting on the cold stone floor, as if every step was being watched by invisible eyes. Ava Cole walked into the priority area in a neat navy blue suit. Underneath was a simple white shirt. The collar was buttoned. Her hair was tied back, no makeup, no trendy accessories, only a thin black backpack slung over her shoulder. If one did not notice the ticket in her hand, one could mistake her for a university professor who had just finished a lecture, or a graduate student on her way to a conference. And that was what made Lauren Price, the employee at the check-in counter, stop longer than necessary. Lauren frowned slightly, enough to avoid offending politeness, but enough for any sensitive eye to notice something was amiss. She took the ticket, glanced down at the words, "First Class," then glanced back at Ava with a wry, knowing smile. "We don't usually see first-class passengers dressed like this," Lauren said, not loudly, not sharply, but it was as sharp as a needle stabbing into the other person's self-esteem. Ava didn't respond. No raised eyebrows, no retreat, no argument. She just stared an oddly quiet stare, not of resignation, but of choice. The choice of someone who had lived long enough to know that sometimes silence isn't weakness, but a finely owned weapon. Her left hand gently touched the silver chain hidden beneath her collar, stroking the oval pendant where her mother's name was engraved. The woman who had whispered to her when she was little, "You don't have to yell to be powerful." Lauren pretended to check the IDs as if she were deciphering a classified document, her eyes darting back and forth between the photo and Ava's face. Slow, halting, deliberately lingering as if to tell the entire row behind her that something was wrong. The passengers behind her began to move. A few exchanged glances, and a young man nearby, a student or an amateur journalist, perhaps discreetly, pulled out his phone and turned on his camera. While all eyes passed by with strange attitudes, only Ava stood still, steadfast as a rock in the stream of prejudice. Not because of the undertones, not because of intentional delay, but because she knew true strength does not need to raise its voice to be seen. The small conference room, hidden behind a cold metal door on the ground floor of the airport, was where pilots and flight attendants paused to prepare for a long journey. The pale gray walls were bare of pictures, save for a simple wall clock and a flight roster neatly pasted next to the coffee machine. Captain Dana Blake sat at the head of the table, his elbow resting lightly on the wood, his other hand holding a steaming cup of coffee, a calm demeanor belying his gaze. His sharp, almost inquisitive eyes scanned each crew member as if assessing not only their demeanor but also their thoughts. Beside her were the crew members, most of them checking equipment or skimming safety checklists. But in the routine silence, Dana's voice rang out soft, barely audible, but so clear that every word carried the weight of thinly veiled prejudice. "I'm seeing too many unfamiliar faces in first these days. This isn't the same clientele anymore." No one responded. There was no polite chuckle, no vague acknowledgement as was usually the case when a superior sought approval. There was only a long silence, as if the room had just heard something no one dared to repeat. Josh Bennett, the youngest male flight attendant in the crew, was checking his seatbelts for a moment. He didn't say anything, didn't look up, but his eyes flickered to Dana, then down to the table, where his fingers were tapping absent-mindedly, as if trying to shake off the strange feeling that was rising. His discomfort was evident in his faster-than-usual breathing and the unfocused distance between his eyes. He was too young to react, and yet perceptive enough to know that there were things that, if said at the wrong time, could not only damage his career, but also his own belief in what was fair. Dana was different. She didn't need to say it, because her words were always accompanied by a distinctive idiom, the kind of language that only those who had ever stood outside the boundaries of acceptance could truly understand. For Dana, first class was more than a place to sit, it was a reflection of class. And class, in her mind, was not for strange faces or people who are not like us. Outside the conference room, a boarding announcement reverberated over the loudspeakers. But inside, an ideology was quietly planted, softly spoken, but with great weight. Footsteps echoed on the thick carpet of the first-class cabin as Ava Cole entered the cabin. She didn't look up, didn't scan the area, didn't rush. Her movements were calm, slow enough to let others know she wasn't in a hurry, steady enough that anyone looking at her would have a hard time denying her self-control. Her canvas crossbody backpack was unfastened and stowed under seat 2A, next to the window, in front of which was a curtain that shimmered with a soft gold light. Ava sat down, buckled her seatbelt, and touched the silver pendant to her chest as a reflex, what her mother had once called balance in a place where control is easily lost. The flight had not yet taken off, and the passengers were settling into their seats when suddenly, from the front of the cockpit, Captain Dana Blake appeared. No announcement, no smile as usual. She walked straight towards seat 2A, with a gaze as if searching for something wrong in a perfectly arranged picture. "Stand up, show me your ID, now." The words weren't loud, but the tone was enough to shatter the quiet atmosphere in first class. Sporadic glances turned, a few passengers frowning, not understanding what was happening. Ava looked up, her eyes not panicked, nor challenging, just staring straight ahead, calm, as if she had seen this version of the world too many times to be surprised. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" she asked, her voice low and soft as if testing the other person. Dana didn't answer. Not a word, not a warning, not a reason. She raised her hand, and for that brief moment, all that was heard was the dry slap of a slap that echoed through the expensive cabin, where everything was supposed to be measured in kindness. Ava's cheeks flushed under the overhead LED lights. The sound of the impact silenced the cabin. A flight attendant behind her stopped in the aisle, and nearby passengers turned their heads in shock. Tyler Grant, the man in seat 3C, instinctively opened his phone and turned on the camera. He had thought of first class as a place where petty things didn't happen. But that slap, it wasn't just a sound, it was a statement. It wasn't about Ava Cole, it was about the notion of what a woman could be and what value she could have if she didn't look like what others expected. Ava raised her hand to cover her cheek, her fingertips trembling slightly, but her eyes, still, not looking down, not shifting. There was something in them, not anger, but a strangely calm light, as if she was waiting to see how far someone would go before they had to face the consequences themselves. A hush fell over the first-class cabin. No more suitcases being dragged, no more orange juice being offered, no more soft breathing from businessmen checking emails before takeoff. Everything seemed frozen in shock. Ava was still standing there, her hand still pressed lightly to her cheek, but instead of sitting down or moving away, she slowly set her backpack aside, unzipped it, and pulled out a frayed dark brown leather wallet. A small, simple detail that conveyed dignity without being ostentatious. Her movements were slow, as if time were stretching. Everyone watched without breathing heavily. Ava opened her purse, flipped open the lining, and pulled out a small, metallic object. Under the cold white LED lights of the first-class cabin, the gold-plated badge glinted like a knife through the female captain's complacency. The letters were clearly engraved on it. Chief of Police, Los Angeles County. Ava didn't need to raise her voice. She just spoke, loud enough so that there was no mistaking what she had just witnessed. "You just assaulted the Chief of Police for Los Angeles County." The voice was not high, not shaky, not angry. But it rang like a bell against the wall of arrogance that Dana Blake had built over the years flying through the sky. An undeniable truth, a mirror that held up the prejudices she had thought invisible. Dana's body stiffened. Her normally steady captain's steps faltered. She took a half step back, just enough to show the panic rising in her eyes. There was no longer any trace of authority on her lips, only shock, like waking up in the middle of a storm and realizing she'd been on the wrong course. A young flight attendant standing nearby, who had been glancing between the two women, blurted out, a whisper escaping her before she could control it. "Oh my God." No one moved. No one said anything else. In that moment, the little badge in Ava's hand seemed heavier than any suitcase on board, because it was not only a symbol of power, but also a mirror, reflecting the price of prejudice hidden in the guise of procedure, suspicion, or airline security. And what was scarier than that was the silence that followed it. The ground was still spinning, the plane was still taking off as usual. But within hours of the clip being posted, social media exploded like wildfire, wild, uncontrolled, and carrying the weight of justice that had been suppressed for too long. The 41-second clip, shot on passenger Tyler Grant's phone, went viral with unexpected speed. In the frame was a slap of prejudice and a woman who showed no fear. The caption across the clip read, "She's not just a black woman, she's the chief of police." And overnight, the hashtag Justice for Ava climbed straight to the top 2 trending positions on Twitter nationwide. The morning news was no longer the usual weather or stock market stories. On the big screens of CNN, NBC, and Fox News, Ava Cole's face flashed between 2 images, a gleaming police badge and a red hand on her cheek, living proof of the silence broken at the right moment. And when the public spoke up, the system was forced to respond. The airline's board of directors convened an emergency meeting under the cold yellow lights of the strategy room, the place to meet in a crisis of epic proportions. Gone were the diplomatic smiles and diversity and inclusion slogans plastered on the walls, just a series of hastily printed reports and the tense eyes of people more concerned with their reputations than the truth. The next morning, Captain Dana Blake was suspended indefinitely, pending a criminal investigation into assault and racial profiling in public. Although she was once considered by many within the company to be a veteran pillar of the company, that was no longer enough to erase the actions the nation had witnessed in 41 incontrovertible seconds. Lauren Price, the ground staff with the cold smile as the procedure, also could not avoid the wave of public opinion. She was transferred from the foreign guest position. No official announcement was made, but everyone knew internally. The looks, the silent judgments, the unspoken questions from her colleagues said it all. But the story doesn't end with a suspension. It doesn't end with a hashtag. It goes deeper, into the corridors of the airline, into the way first-class tickets are checked in from now on, and into the way young women in Navy suits are perceived as they approach the check-in desk. And it was something none of them, including Ava Cole, could have seen coming. When many expected her to pursue the case, when lawyers began knocking on her door with lucrative offers, and the media kept pushing the story as a new symbol of the fight for justice, Ava Cole took a surprising path. No outrage on the podium, no court appearance to win $1 million settlement, no public apology on primetime. Instead, she sent a handwritten letter in blue ink, lightly italicized, to the airline's board of directors, asking them to conduct a nationwide training series on unconscious bias and implicit discrimination for the entire crew of flight attendants, pilots, and ground staff. No demands, no conditions, just an outstretched hand, even though others had already grabbed it with a slap. In the letter she wrote, "I believe the air belongs to everyone. Dignity should never require a badge." A few days later, amid the flood of supportive emails and messages, Ava received a letter from someone she didn't know, but who was the silent link in the story. Tyler Grant, the passenger who filmed the fateful moment. In the letter, Tyler confessed that he was a flight attendant who was often told to keep quiet when he witnessed misbehavior toward passengers of color. He wrote, "You helped me find my voice, Ava. That day, you didn't just stand up for yourself. You helped me stand up for the first time, too. You helped me find my voice, Ava. That day, you not only stood up for yourself, but you also made me dare to stand up for the first time too. That evening, when the media storm had died down, when the sky outside the window was a thin strip of moonlight, Ava returned to her small apartment tucked away on a quiet street in Echo Park. She hung her suit jacket on a hook, took off her backpack and set it on a chair, and slowly unwound the silver necklace she always wore around her neck. The pendant engraved with a name that had faded over the years. Angela, her mother, who had taught her how to walk quietly through the noise, how to keep her back straight when the world tried to force her head down. She placed the necklace on the wooden table next to her still warm cup of tea, then bowed her head and whispered, her voice as soft as the wind but as clear as an oath. "You were right, Mom. Calm is louder." That slap echoed through the first-class cabin like a thunderclap, sharp, obvious, undeniable. But then there was a strange silence. No screams, no angry response. Just a woman, quietly raising her hand to her cheek, her eyes still looking straight ahead, still bright as if they had never been touched. And it was that silence, calm, unshaken, refusing to back down, that silenced the entire cabin. Because the calm in the storm is sometimes the most shocking sound. The slap was loud, but she was silent after, was thunderous. And when the badge emerged from her purse, not brandished like a weapon, not flaunted like a trophy, but simply an inescapable fact, it was not just Ava Cole's badge. It was a symbol for thousands of women who had walked into those cold rooms, who had presented their tickets to skeptical stares, who had been treated as if their presence were a mistake that needed to be corrected. It is a response to everyone who has ever been told by words or by looks, by systems or by prejudice, "You don't belong here." And then, there they stood, calm, steady, more belonging than anyone had ever doubted them.